Hello everyone. I'm Swasti and I work at the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analyses. I specialize on Europe's security, defense and economic policies with respect to larger geopolitical churnings. One such churning that has led the world to a dangerous brinkmanship has been Nancy Pelosi's recent visit to Taiwan and China's harsh military reactions to the same. I'm sure you must have seen it. While interesting observations and interesting remarks were made from leading powers in the world, the curious case of Europe and European Union needs a bit of explaining. While Europe has been eager to take hardened position on China on several matters, but its Taiwan policy has been somewhat ambiguous. Let's try to understand why is that so and what implications does it hold for the rest of the world. So, the European Union, you see, since the end of the Cold War, has emerged as a formidable economic power, rather incapable of defending its military or economic security. European Union has hoped that its economic weight would translate into enough geopolitical traction, a faulty assumption whose price the Europeans are paying today with structural dependencies and almost no plan B for quick diversification, let alone decoupling. EU's largest trading partner, China, has been playing divide and rule in Europe, arm twisting the bloc's economic dependence on Beijing to drive its global ambitions, especially on the touchy matter of Taiwan. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war that I've been talking about so much has manifested many latent and not so latent discrepancies in European Union economic statecraft, which is designed to perform amid favorable situations but lacks the resilience to absorb uncertainties. While the energy dependence on Russia is well explored, the worrying dependencies on China aren't. However, there comes a tipping point when challenges begin to unravel latent power structures and a new reality emerges with changed rules of engagement. For Europe, a part of that realization did come with China's bullying of the EU to soften its coronavirus disinformation report. This came in 2020. But the tipping point came with Putin's war in Ukraine and the strengthened Russia-China bond over it. Let's see how China dents this EU unity. China has been successful in converging its economic power into geopolitical influence with astonishing success worldwide. It is with that confidence that China has been trying to dent the EU unity for the last few months by economically bullying a country called Lithuania, which is an EU member, over its stance on Taiwan. If the EU fails to respond adequately, Europeans seem doomed to spend the 21st century being pushed around by outside powers. The EU has so far stood united in its support for Lithuania while taking certain countermeasures to fight off China's economic coercion, and it's also been joined by major global players like Australia. But there are other structural dependencies and internal divisions it needs to address right away that, if left unattended, could wreak havoc on an already befuddled Europe, which is dependent on Russia's energy. So, while the EU realizes that China will continue to be a major trade and investment partner, obviously, it needs to devise impactful economic strategies to counter Beijing's economic coercion. Lithuania's digression from China's policy on Taiwan led to Beijing downgrading its diplomatic relationship and implementing an effective trade embargo against Lithuanian goods. Now, interestingly, the trade embargo was not considered enough by Xi Jinping, as China accounts only for about 1% of Lithuania's exports. So, Beijing exhibited a fuller spectrum of its power by introducing extra retributive measures, so extra punishment against several European Union companies that use Lithuanian labor. But in doing so, Beijing dented the very rationale of the EU supply chain, which is the core of their economic integration and existence as a bloc. EU owes much of its economic weight to its regional value chain and how that is embedded into the global value chain. China expected that harsh measures would force the European Union to pressurize Lithuania to apologize along the terms acceptable to China. But that didn't happen. EU rallied behind Lithuania and in January 2022 decided to file a formal complaint at the World Trade Organization against China. And this is a first. Let's see how China has been dividing Europe. There is more to China's punishing Lithuania than just Taiwan. After Xi Jinping came to power in 2012, the quest for China's influence in the world, riding on its aggressive economic statecraft, began via the very well-known, the famous Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. China had launched a specific program for the East European countries, which was a strategic move. So it was happening under the BRI. So it was a strategic move to divide and weaken the EU and make them economically dependent on China. Back in 2012, the Central and East European countries had welcomed China's then 16+1 mechanism, which was later expanded to 17+1 with the addition of Greece. So, to China's dismay, the very countries that were supposed to be China's gateway to Europe, a decade later, all of them signed memoranda of understandings with the US, targeting Huawei's access to their 5G networks, or they landed up joining Washington's Clean Network Initiative, which is also a kind of containment policy aimed at Huawei and other Chinese tech companies. So the bad reputation that China has earned. The 17+1 group got frustrated with the unfulfilled projects as the Chinese BRI dream met with disappointments. For the EU, the 17+1 became a mechanism, a symbol, whose ultimate goal was to divide the bloc because it had grouped 11 EU members with 5 non-EU members, thereby undermining the unity of the 27-member bloc as a single market. Now, arguments have emerged that the 17+1 mechanism has become a zombie mechanism, which is similar to the Chinese zombie companies that are kept alive through cheap loans and state aid, only to avoid problems that closing them down would trigger. Let me tell you how. The CCP also keeps alive degenerating economic statecraft mechanisms to maintain the optics of China's infallible mega plans, like, the CCP can never go wrong. Subsequently, the EU started accusing China of divide and conquer tactics, more frequently by May 2021. So Lithuania pulled out of the 17+1, urging European countries to stick to the unity and solidarity of the EU itself. The Lithuania-China row forced the EU to stand up to protect its core economic rationale. Around the same time, which was mid-2021, the European Parliament voted overwhelmingly to freeze the legislative process for ratifying the famous EU's investment deal with China, Xi Jinping's dream, unless Beijing lifted sanctions against EU lawmakers that were imposed after the 27 EU countries sanctioned Xinjiang officials over mass internment of Uyghur minorities. Since the end of 2021, the EU Commission has started strengthening its toolbox of autonomous measures. It has adopted a proposal for an anti-coercion instrument which would give the EU more possibilities to react in the event of economic coercion by both Russia and China. The proposal could be a watershed moment towards a new geo-economic order. So, Lithuania's fallout has paved the way for further disenchantment. While Lithuania left, 11 other EU countries still remain in the 16 plus 1 grouping that are, countries like Bulgaria, Croatia, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Greece, Hungary, Latvia, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia. Out of these, 2 more have openly challenged China's Taiwan policy. The next to attract China's wrath is likely to be the Czech Republic, whose successive governments have issued independent statements against China's Taiwan policy. In 2020, let me tell you, the Czech Senate's visit to Taiwan had angered China. But the Czech Republic did not buckle, and to China's consternation, this visit was returned by the Taiwanese delegation's Eastern Europe tour in October 2021 to the Czech Republic, to Slovenia and Lithuania, of course. The latest to join the list of Taiwan supporters in the now 16 plus 1 bloc is Slovenia, that I just mentioned, whose president recently criticized Beijing's economic coercion and vowed to strengthen relations with Taiwan. A few days after this controversial statement, the Slovenian trade groups reported Chinese backlash. So the Chinese are very quick with punishing. According to some Slovenian press agencies, the Slovenian Chinese Business Council said Chinese partners were already terminating certain contracts and exiting the agreed investments. What is this? Just a way to punish. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how the EU took China to the WTO. So, after months of failed bilateral diplomatic attempts following China's sanctions in January 2022, the EU launched a case against Beijing at the WTO for targeting goods from Lithuania over its stance on Taiwan. This move further deteriorated ties with the long negotiated investment deal I just told you about was already on the rocks. The key, however, is for the EU to remain united and take necessary actions to identify and diversify from structural dependencies as well. So, Lithuania alone cannot affect China's economic interests, but a united European Union will. As of 2021, the EU is China's biggest trading partner. The European Union officials have been very vocal, when they say that China has Europeanized this problem and it has turned it into a test for the entire EU. Despite challenges from within and particularly from Hungary, a more confident EU seems to be learning to convert its economic might into strategic leverage. China's divisive tactics have set a bad international precedent, which will discourage other European countries from trusting it as a bankable economic partner, something that is happening so openly with Russia. Now, let's understand what is the complex terrain of Europe's dependencies on China. So, it's not just Russian oil and gas. EU countries, especially countries like Germany, are also dependent on China for industrial metals and rare earths. These are reportedly needed for wind turbines, for electric vehicles, for solar cells and semiconductors, and their demand is only set to rise. Now, China could arm twist the EU for its rare earth dependence as well, because China not only exports 98% of rare earths to the EU, but it also monopolizes the mining and processing of these materials. Just like Putin has weaponized energy for political outcomes, Xi Jinping could weaponize the export of rare earths to the EU in lieu of the latter's stand on Taiwan or China's faulty trade practices. A March 2022 report hinted that China could be planning to weaponize export of rare earths to the US. Learning from the Russian experience, Europe should be worrying lest raw materials exports from China reduce at this critical juncture. Beijing plans to cut exports to meet their own domestic demand. All these put together, there has been brainstorming within the EU for achieving European strategic autonomy on a horizontal cross-policy basis, which means lots of policies together like defense, trade, industrial policy, digital policy, economic and monetary policy, etc. Now, this would strengthen the EU's multilateral action, self-reliance and resilience, and in turn reduce dependence on external actors, making it less vulnerable to external threats such as what we are discussing today. The European Raw Materials Alliance was founded in 2020, is also meant to enhance supply security and diversify imports for Europe's industries. The EU actually needs to evolve principles that should guide Europe's quest for economic security. It is only once they set their house in order will outward and crucial policies such as engaging the Indo-Pacific region will make any significant impact. Europe today is standing at a cusp of a paradigm shift in its Weltanschauung, which is German for worldview. The political economic order it thrived on is giving way to a new paradigm where profit motive shall be curbed in favor of resilient supply chains. Diversification would precede mere economic gains, and the convenient separation of economics from politics, which is characteristic of the Merkel era, will no longer work. And the European Union stand on Taiwan will be a decisive marker in deciding its future course over China. Until next time, thank you so much.